Number 25. The Teapot Dome Scandal. During U.S. President Warren Harding's time in office in 1922, Interior Secretary Albert Fall accepted a bribe of nearly $500,000 from Mammoth Oil and Pan American Petroleum to get leasing rights to some oil reserves in Wyoming. Unfortunately for him, the press caught wind and he was exposed. Prior to Watergate, this was considered the greatest and most sensational scandal in the history of American politics. Number 24. The Profumo Affair. The Profumo Affair was a 1963 British political scandal named after John Profumo, the Secretary of State. His affair with Christine Keeler, the mistress of an alleged Soviet spy, followed by his lying in the House of Commons when he was questioned about it, forced his resignation and damaged the reputation of Prime Minister Harold Macmillan's government. Number 23. The Chappaquiddick Incident. On July 18, 1969, Mary Jo Kopechne, a female passenger of U.S. Senator Edward Ted Kennedy, was killed when he accidentally drove his car off a bridge and into a channel on Chappaquiddick Island in Massachusetts. Kennedy swam free and left the scene, not reporting for nearly 9 hours, but Kopechne died in the vehicle. In the early hours of July 19th, her body and the car were recovered. Kennedy pleaded guilty to a charge of leaving the scene of an accident after causing injury and received 2 months in jail. It became a national scandal and may have influenced Kennedy's decision not to campaign for president in '72. Number 22. Robert Packwood. Oregon politician Robert Packwood's political career began to unravel in 1992 when a Washington Post story ran with alleged claims of sexual abuse and assault by 10 women, chiefly former staffers. He initially denied the claims, but after portions of his diary were subpoenaed, he ended up resigning rather than facing the fire. Number 21. The Wilbur Mills Scandal. Wilbur was a popular U.S. congressman, but things fell apart for him after getting a DUI, right after engaging in a scuffle with an Argentinian stripper named Fan Fox. To make things even more comical, when he was pulled over for the DUI, she was actually with him in the car. Before the police officer could even say a word, however, she allegedly jumped out the back and dove into a drainage ditch, after which she was taken to a mental hospital, which left Wilbur with some serious explaining to do. Number 20. The Mel Reynolds Scandal. In August 1994, Illinois Congressman Mel Reynolds was indicted for sexual assault and criminal sexual abuse for engaging in a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old campaign volunteer. He initially denied the allegations and continued to campaign, but was eventually convicted and sent to prison, both for those charges as well as charges related to money laundering. Number 19. The Keating Five. The Keating Five were 5 United States senators accused of corruption in 1989. It ignited a major political scandal as part of the larger savings and loan crisis of the 1980s. Basically, they'd prevented Charles Keating, chairman of the Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, from being audited in return for receiving campaign funding. Unfortunately for everybody else in America, the association collapsed under corruption, causing billions of dollars worth of damages and ruining the reputations of the senators. Number 18. The Chen Shui-bian Scandals. Although President Chen wanted to see a strong and independent Taiwan, his family's and his own lack of self-control managed to undermine many of his positions. His son-in-law was caught money laundering and inside trading, his wife wired over $21 million to various banks in the world, and he was arrested after his resignation for embezzlement of funds and receiving bribes. High aspirations don't necessarily make good leaders. Number 17. Berlusconi Bunga Bunga parties. Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi was involved in a lot of messes in his 17 years in office. He was known as a playboy, fraud, pedophile, swindler, and gangster. Basically anything bad, that's what he was. The most famous of his escapades, however, were probably the huge promiscuous parties he threw that have come to be known by the nonsensical term Bunga Bunga. Number 16. The Moshe Katsav rape scandal. Moshe Katsav, former president of Israel, was accused of raping and sexually harassing up to 10 women. While he was still in office, police raided his house and seized computers and documents. There were calls for him to resign or suspend himself from the presidency, but he refused. After stepping down, however, he lost his presidential immunity and was promptly convicted. Number 15. The Florida State voting recount. The election between George Bush and Al Gore was plagued with issues, but it wasn't until Florida bungled its voting system that the trouble really began. With the world watching, the state had to count and recount all its ballots until finally the courts stepped in and chose Bush. Number 14. The Gary Condit Affair. Gary Condit, a former representative from California, was reported to have an affair with Chandra Levy, an intern at his D.C. office. After she disappeared, he admitted to the affair, but denied anything to do with her disappearance. He was cleared as a suspect, however, when Chandra's body was found and police determined that Ingmar Guandique, a Salvadorian immigrant, was responsible. Number 13. Joe Wilson. After standing up before Congress and yelling, "You liar," at President Barack Obama, Congressman Joe Wilson was rebuked by the House of Representatives for his behavior and later apologized to the president about the event. Number 12. The Langer Affair. When North Dakota Governor William Langer took office in 1932, he and 5 co-conspirators required all state employees to donate part of their salaries to their political party. Collecting the money was not technically prohibited by state law and was a common practice. However, when donations were made by Highway Department employees, who were paid through federal programs, the U.S. Attorney General charged that the donations constituted a conspiracy to defraud the federal government. He and his colleagues were eventually brought to court. Although he was convicted of a felony and told to resign as governor, he ended up declaring North Dakota independent, instituting martial law, and barricading himself in the governor's mansion until the Supreme Court could meet with him. Eventually, a settlement was reached and a new governor was chosen. Number 11. The Foley Affair. When ABC investigative correspondent Brian Ross reported that Congressman Mark Foley had sent email passages from his personal AOL account to a former congressional page, asking the page to send photos of himself, Foley's office confirmed, saying that they had sent the messages, but that it was a regular practice to ask individuals for photos who might be looking for recommendations. Eventually, however, other pages ended up coming forward, and it led to a severely tarnished reputation. Number 10. The Larry Craig Scandal. On June 11, 2007, U.S. Senator Larry Craig was arrested for lewd conduct in a men's restroom at the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Apparently, there had been complaints of sexual activity in the restroom, so a police officer was stationed in one of the stalls undercover. Eventually, Craig entered the stall next to him and began reaching under the partition to signal the officer. The officer responded by flashing his badge and pointing towards the exit. Number 9. John Edwards. Although the National Enquirer isn't known as the most legitimate news source, they did manage to spill the beans on Senator Edwards' affair with videographer Riel Hunter. The worst part about the whole situation, though, was that his wife Elizabeth had been diagnosed with cancer. Number 8. Eliot Spitzer. According to published reports, investigators believe Spitzer paid up to $80,000 for prostitutes over a period of several years while he was Attorney General, and later as governor. Spitzer's first drew attention of federal investigators when his bank reported suspicious money transfers, which initially led investigators to believe he'd been hiding bribe proceeds. The investigation of the governor led to the discovery of the prostitution ring, after which he obviously resigned. Number 7. Rod Blagojevich. After it was discovered that Illinois Congressman Rod Blagojevich tried to sell Barack Obama's former congressional seat to the highest bidder, his plan didn't go over very well with authorities, and he was arrested on some severe charges of corruption. Number 6. The Appalachian Trail Lie. From June 18th until June 24th, 2009, the whereabouts of politician Mark Sanford were unknown. He'd told his staff that he would be hiking the Appalachian Trail, but failed to answer any phone calls. Not long after, however, reporter Gina Smith ran into him at the airport in Atlanta, returning from Argentina. Apparently he had a mistress, and he decided to go pay her a visit. Number 5. The Clinton-Lewinsky Scandal. Infamous for his firm denial and then subsequent admission of having an affair with 22-year-old White House aide Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton faced impeachment, although he was later acquitted. Number 4. The William Jefferson Scandal. Suspecting Louisiana Congressman William Jefferson of bribery, the FBI raided his congressional offices in 2006, but he was re-elected later that year. On June 4, 2007, however, a federal grand jury indicted Jefferson on 16 felony charges related to corruption, which led to 13 years in jail. Number 3. The Plame Affair. In 2003, Washington Post journalist Robert Novak effectively ended Valerie Plame's career with the CIA, from which she later resigned in December 2005. by revealing her identity in his column as an operative. Louis Scooter Libby, advisor to then Vice President Dick Cheney, was eventually determined to be the source of the leak and subsequently charged. Number 2. The Iran-Contra affair. Also referred to as Irangate, the scandal involved U.S. President Ronald Reagan's senior administration officials secretly facilitating the sale of arms to Iran. They'd hoped that the arms sales would secure the release of hostages and allow U.S. intelligence agencies to fund the Nicaraguan Contras. Unfortunately for them, the plan was uncovered and led to a huge international mess. And number 1, Watergate. The Watergate scandal blew up in June 1972 after a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office complex of Washington, D.C. The Nixon administration initially intended to cover up its involvement, but eventually led to his resignation. There's still no conclusive understanding of what they were actually trying to accomplish with the break-in.